Today's episode is brought to you by EliteFTS.com. Founded in 1998 with the primary aim to live, learn, and pass on. Please help Elite FTS support this mission by smashing the like button, leaving a comment, sharing with a friend, and thinking of us for your training needs. If you can put it in a gym bag or load weights on it, Elite FTS has it.
What's going on? I'm Dave Tate. We are broadcasting from the middle of the Elite FTS weight room, where the underground still thrives and you're part of the crew. It's time to sit down, keep it real, and cut the bullshit. Welcome to Table Talk. What's going on, guys? We are back with, I guess you could say this is a bonus episode. I kind of stuck it in between some of the other ones. I'll get into the reason why I did that here in a second. But before that, I want to remind you that we have the limited edition apparel that dropped a couple days ago. Go to EliteFTS.com or the link that's in the description to pick up. Again, the limited edition apparel helps directly support the Table Talk podcast. So any support that you can put there is appreciated. The other thing I wanted to do is to thank the people that joined the crew, the support group. That sounds kind of weird, right? Support group. The support group for the Table Talk podcast. We put that out there about a month ago. The intention is to get 200 members in there. Then once we get 200 members, we can have more bonus episodes, kind of like what we're doing here, put on extra content. If you become a member, you get 15% off all limited edition apparel, all Elite FTS apparel, the Table Talk coffee, and any other Table Talk products that come out. You also get every one of my ebooks for free. So in the description, you'll see a link that says support the crew. Click on that, help support the podcast. It's very appreciated. I brought Matt back because when he was out last time, for the guys that listened to the podcast, it was like 3 hours.
Yeah.
You know, and we both had to piss like crazy and everything else. There were some things that we didn't get to. We didn't get to some topics like the overhead press, longevity, and nutrition. So I wanted to have him back for that. And then Matt just recently broke Tom Platz's squat record. And after he did that, he sent me a funny text, to be honest with you, which cracked me up. Then, you know, we decided we should talk about this because it's a feat that's been around for a long time, which is controversial. So we'll talk about that, but more the training that kind of goes into it, because in some ways that can parlay into a 225 bench, you know, so there's a strategy that can go into that. You just don't, well, some try, right? You just don't on a whim, just say, hey, look, we all have done it. Hey, look, I'm going to try this, right? And anybody if anybody's not tried to squat X amount of weight for over 20 reps, try it. Some people have died doing it, so I guess I shouldn't say that, right?
Well, I mean, it's been close. I mean, I think anybody, regardless, if you know anything over 300 pounds for 25 or 20 reps is impressive.
No, it gets you because first off, there's a strategy, because I've tried this many times, right? It's like, okay, I'm just going to do them as fast as I can. Nope, wrong, can't breathe.
Yeah.
I'm going to do 3, pause, do 3, pause. Nope, wrong, don't.
Yeah.
So there's, you know, the one fact of the matter with all of it is you have to be fucking strong.
Yes.
That's the first part about it.
Yeah.
That I do know. So, so getting to it was what, 525?
520. You know, and like I said, we tried to calibrate it all to get it exactly perfect. That way, if there was ever any controversy, I got all the plates laid right there. I used a Mastodon bar. So that way, that made it easy. That's a 62-pound bar or whatever. Yeah. So long story short, yeah, it's in the vicinity. I don't even know if anybody ever saw the side of Platz's squat to know if it even was more than 5 plates. There's been video on Kazmaier saying that it wasn't real, and he backspotted him in it. And so I don't really know. You know, I think most of the controversy is, well, why don't you do it high bar narrow? And that's valid. But the other valid is how tall is Tom Platz?
Well, here's the other thing. Who cares?
Exactly. Number one. Number two, you know, the problem is that the style in which we squat, if I did it Olympic style at my height at 6'1", you know, I'd be lifting 3.5 feet a set. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's just, or a rep. So it's just, you know, for me, I had to put it in my strongest position, which actually was narrower than I used to squat, just because the hips are 42 years old now. So it was a little bit more leg for me. But in my opinion, watching the video, I am very hard on myself is I looked at every rep and said that would count at every meet that I've ever been to. And that's all that matters.
Yeah. Before we get into the training, let's put the video up real quick because I'm gonna ask different type of questions, right? Because I've done shit like this.
Can we put it on our
yeah, okay. Put it here.
But yeah, it's one of those things where Mike O'Hearn, I'd say the first time that I attempted it, Mike O'Hearn was like, hey, how many times can you squat 500? And I was like, well,
don't start it yet. Get it back there. Yes. All right. So a couple things for anybody that wants to try to do some rep work. Before you started, you're not like hitting ammonia caps.
No.
You're not doing anything to increase your arousal. You want it low.
Mellow.
As mellow as you can be.
As you know, from watching me compete for years, I never was about getting jacked up.
Yeah.
And I actually learned that from Ed Cohen. Ed Cohen, when I was a kid, I went up and trained with him a couple of times at Quad's gym. And he said, you got to learn to hit big weights relaxed. He goes, if you watch Chuck, our old training partner, you watch Chuck, he said he's missed more lifts than he's attempted. And a lot of it's because he's too zooted. He's too out of control. He's too aggressive to touch the bar. And I think you were somewhat that way too, and you're competitive. For me, it was about beating the weights with finesse. I had to get in complete control and focus on every little thing to do perfect, and I had the power to do it. So for me, it's a different type of mentality. I mean, the first warm-ups to this and the thought process is, knees out, chest up, don't let the head drop, keep the foot pressure perfect, and that will give you the best shot. Because if you walk in and just like bow, 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 you're trying to just go as hard as you can the first 10, the adrenaline is going to drop with that much time. If this might have been a sped up version of the actual lift, because when I first posted it on YouTube Shorts, you only get a minute. So we sped it up a little bit. It actually took about 1 minute and 47 seconds. So as anybody knows, at 45 seconds, if you're doing something kind of hard, that's when shit hits the fan. Now do it for another minute. With that being said, the thought process on that, your adrenaline has to stay calm. You can't use adrenaline on this because you will burn the gas tank out. So I knew that I didn't really need to take much air or breath to do 12 or 14. I could probably do that in 2 or 3 breaths. But I knew to last over 20, I was going to have to segment that down, kind of what we were talking about, and go, okay, hit every, and I don't remember watching the video, but every 3 or 4, you need to stop, pause, take some air in, get everything rebalanced, and boom, 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 boom. So basically break it into 5 sets of 5.
Is that what your strategy was?
That was my thought process.
Okay,
Once I got to 5 and 5 was just scooting, then the next thought process is, do I need to try to outrun the lactic threshold, which is 45 seconds to a minute?
Yeah.
Because I knew when I hit a minute, no matter how easy it felt, inside was going to be a fucking battle.
Yeah.
So, but my initial goal, thought process, when I first stepped under that bar right there, was do 5 sets of 5.
Okay. That's what I was wondering, is what the strategy is.
Yeah.
Because when I've tried the rep stuff before, that's where I fucked up. I'd always like, you get 10, then after I get 10, let's chip away at 5.
Yeah.
And it's like, ooh, no, oxygen debt. You're too gassed.
Well, a lot of it was mental too. If you think, I only got to do 500 5 times. Okay. I mean, some people watching this is like, holy fuck, I can't do that for one. But you got to remember that at my peak, I was at 900-ish raw, and I squatted 1,200 in gear. So when I pick up 500, it's like a normal person picking up 95 in my mind.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously it's still fucking hard, and I'm over 40. But the point is like when I crawled under that, it was going, okay, you only got to do this 5 times, 5 times. That's what I was thinking. Not because when you think 25, that's like not putting your head down and climbing up the mountain.
Yeah.
Don't look up and see how much farther you got to go. Just put one foot in front of the other.
Yes. All right. So go ahead and let it roll. So I think we're 2 reps into it.
So if you watch, the first thing I do is draw the knee out and sit the hips back. So I'm trying to break, about an inch below parallel, which you would agree that's good. I don't want to let the knee go too far over the toe so I can distribute the weight through the quad and hamstring. But what I'm trying to use is glute. Now, the big problem with most people trying to do this is going to be their core is not going to be able to hold this much weight for this long.
All right, pause it there. I think we're right about 12, 13, something like that.
Right now, what you're starting to realize is that the average person, even if they were super strong, their lower back and their abdominal wall and their breathing would be completely fucked if they're powerlifters.
So where are you there?
Right there. My wind is good. My strength's good. My balance is good. I don't feel shit. I'm like, I got 20, maybe more than 25 right now, but I'm still sticking to the plan. So in training, what I'm thinking, what I thought was, and I was right, was I needed to up the amount of reps I was doing on reverse hypers and I need to up the time in which I was doing my 45-degree back extensions and glute ham raises. So now instead of doing sets, I'm trying to get it somewhere, trying to do it as much as I can in 2 minutes.
Yes.
Because I knew I broke it down to say it's going to take maybe 3 to 5 seconds per rep, which it was faster than that. But with that being said, it was going to be somewhere between 1.5 minutes and 2 minutes to do it. I knew that what it was going to take. So I tried to make all of my timing of my sets for my accessories, the small muscles that I knew were going to get pissed around that timeline. They were already used to training that long.
All right, go ahead and roll it. So we're at 13.
Now, the tough part now is you can see the balance is starting to get a little shaky. So now I'm focusing on foot pressure, and I'm trying to not let my quad take over so that my back doesn't round over. That's what I find is the big issue with squatting, either with your head.
Pause it again. So you can see that the breathing is starting to get to you.
Yeah.
But your torso is still staying tight.
Yeah.
You know, that's where other people will screw up.
Exactly. So what the big thing to focus on that is to keep everything in my opinion, arched. That way the ass is always leading first, and it's always trying to take the pressure, because if you try to do this all quad, kind of like Tom Platz did, but you're not 5'5" and you don't just scissor down easily, it's going to be the other muscles that go first. So what I find is that if I can stay in a perfect symmetrical position, for me being 6'1", that it just makes it the lift as efficient as possible. And that's what we always talked about. When you draw the leg out and you push out on the knee and you get the chest up and the sternum up as high as you can, depending on how you're built, it makes you a very efficient squatter, which not only lifts maximal weights, but also can make maximal reps.
All right, roll.
So now I'm really just focusing
19.
on foot pressure.
20.
Yep. And now this is where I see why people are dying.
Yeah. So stop there.
This is where you can tell about 20 is just where the threshold of human limit starts to happen. And depending on how strong you are, it could be the weight. But the reason that's been a record for so long is because the lactate threshold. But for me, the wind was fine. It was now the burn was a big problem. And the burn was so severe that it was shutting shit down that I couldn't control. So that's where it gets really, really finicky. So with that being said, the hardest part at that point is maintaining focus. Because what you don't realize in that gym right then and there, that was a couple of weeks after we did our how hot was it in here just sitting and talking? We were already sweating. People were asking why your face was red. It's 92 fucking degrees in here. Today it feels like 68 and perfect. So in there we were sitting at about 90. I had 2 fans on me and it was fucking miserable. I wish it would have been today.
Yeah.
And I would have been in the same situation. I think it would have bought me a couple more reps.
All right, go ahead and go. So now you're down to the point where it's rep.
Yeah, it's basically trying not to fucking die.
And this is where the absolute strength really starts to come in.
And the mental toughness.
Yeah.
The mental toughness is just fucking out of hand. But what you'll find with most people that are trying that is they're not going to maintain that technique.
Yeah.
My body.
Today's episode is brought.
Yep, there
It's
you
all right. My body has always been pushed through those higher rep ranges for my warm up. So some of that I was already adapted to. And I had played around with that on my belt squat a couple of times and hit that number. And I was like, okay, the legs are good to do it. Then it was the question of, was the core going to be able to hold it that long?
So when you decided to peak for this, what did you change with your squat training?
Well, not much. So what I did was I made the warm-ups a little harder. So I always talk about trying to keep winning warm-ups between 2-3 RPE and at maximum 5-6. So the average is usually around 4. So a 4 RPE for me would be something like doing 275 for 4 sets of 25 on the belt squat. It fucking sucks. It burns. But in 5 minutes, I can max effort lift and no problem.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a 4 to me. Something that and another way to describe it would be if I could sit down after doing something RPE 4 for 3 to 5 minutes, that it just feels like I just warmed up. So that takes a long time, and people are like, well, what's the percentage? What's this? Percentages are variable. You know, if we know that strength is adjustable by 10% per day for variable reasons, stressing, nutrition, hydration, multiple things, you really can't utilize percentages to train anymore until you prep for a contest. So I wouldn't say I'd necessarily prep for this. I just slowly made my warm-ups a little bit more the focus point. And then the main lift, I tried to hold on to as much core exercise strength as I could, but I also was building in recovery. So again, I think the biggest problem is people think you peak by going harder, but if you have trained for so many years, you peak by going easier.
Yes.
Because the body's always trying to reconstruct itself from being damaged. What happens when the damage goes away and you hit that super compensation peak?
Yes.
Well, if you're in good shape, you could do reps or max. It doesn't matter. So for me, it's always having that blend. But the reason that I really wanted to try that was because I pushed max weights for so long. I wanted a new goal that was still specific enough to be powerlifting, but not specific enough that, it made me have to work for a different venture physically.
Yeah.
But I had a huge advantage because I've been doing winning warm-ups for the last 8 years.
So you didn't have, I'm thinking what most people would do trying to train for this. They're going to start at, maybe it's that weight, maybe it's a lower weight, and start doing the sets of 15, 20 to try to get conditioned.
I did do some of that. And mostly I didn't do it for what people would think though. So 6 weeks out from doing it, which was about when we did that podcast, I did 225 for 25, right? Not even half. But what I'm doing is I'm just getting used to the straight bar again because I train conjugate style. I don't touch straight bars that much. Why? Because I'm already good at it. So if anybody could take anything away from this podcast, quit training the shit you like and start finding. So if the camber bar, you suck at camber bar, it's telling you that you have a weakness there. If you suck at safety bar with bands, but you're good with chains, then maybe you're not reactive enough. If you're good free, but you suck on a box, you need to do more box. I mean, it's very simple, but it's the hard part is ego's out the door. When you really want to train for your weaknesses, you have to be honest with yourself and know your exercises that are going to make you better, but you don't necessarily like to do.
Yeah.
So I keep those exercises at full 100% capacity on max effort day. But what I did was to deload was I did 225 or 35 with the Mastodon bar, 240. I did that for 25 reps just to say, okay, my shoulders feel good. I'm back under the straight bar. You know how it is.
Yeah.
You get over 35 and you've been benching 6 wheels.
Yeah, if your elbows can't get underneath it,
Yeah, so what people don't see is the real warm-up and deload to that is stretching under a straight bar for about an hour and a half a week, just to get it all broke loose to where when I put that bar back where I used to sit it feels natural and normal. So week 1 is redial. I would say that's prime week 1. It's redial straight bar. Then the speed day and the next max day is very simple. The speed day is fast, but it's light. And it's also used with a straight bar just to keep the motor pattern. The next day I use something heavy band, almost like a circuit max, and I go up to something that nearly buries me. So I'll go up to something that's right at 100%. The next week I don't do any speed work at all. I just stretch and do accessories, the small muscles I think are going to give out. The next week I did 330 for 25. And then that's when I started posting, I'm going to try this record in a couple weeks. And people are like, oh, you fucking, that's only 300 pounds. You don't have a prayer, motherfucker, all the same bullshit. And I'm just like, whatever. So I do that. And then the next week, that week right before I try it, I actually just go in and warm up with the straight bar to about 50% of what feels like a 5 RPE. I do 5 sets of 5 at that weight just to break it loose, start going that 5 sets of 5 mentality. Ba-boom, ba-boom, ba-boom. Boom, 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 boom. So that way I got the timing down. So what I'm doing is I'm warming up my shoulders. I'm getting the straight bar timing down. I'm starting to increase the weight. In between that, I'm letting my body recover. Now that big super compensation whip has come, and then it's time to hit. So then I walk into the gym. It's hot. I'm like, God damn it. So I'm already seeing these dominoes start to stack against me. But I'm like, I got to do it now because I was going to speak on the East Coast. The business has been getting crazy, and I'm like, I got to get this straightened out. I got to do it now, or I'm just not going to do it. And I started thinking, every year I've thought about doing it, I put it off for something else, and I wait a whole nother year. I'm like, how much longer is my body going to let me? I'm at 40. I'll be 43 in a month.
Yeah.
So I said, no, I'm just blocked it all out. I'm doing it today. So I went 1 plate for 5, 2 plates for 5, 3 plates for 5, 4 plates for, I think, 3. And then I did the actual weight, 520, and just hit it for a single. Walked away, felt it out, got the jitters away, got the foot pressure, knew exactly how I needed to set up, went and sat down for about 10 minutes, and then went to the fucking hammer.
So with, you took up the volume, I would say, the volume or time of the back raise and reverse hypers, were there any other exercises that you pulled up too?
So 45-degree back extensions, reverse hypers, glute ham raises, because I wanted the hamstrings and glutes to play as much of a part as they possibly could. But the problem with the GHR as a heavier guy, you got to back it out sooner because it is a lot of damage. You know, you don't want to get down to that squat at 19 and start pulling hamstrings.
Yeah.
Because it's probably going to come off at that amount of weight and that amount of fatigue.
Yeah. What do you mean by a lot of damage for the people that are listening?
Well, GHR is, you know, for a heavier guy, you're talking, you're doing hamstring curls with 60% of your body weight. I'm just throwing a number out there, but I'd say that's what it feels like.
Yeah.
So if you can do, let's say you're a 250-pound guy and you can do hamstring curls for sets of 10 with 200 pounds, I don't give a fuck how strong you are. That sucks. So when you're doing GHRs like that, that really starts to bring out the ability for the hamstring and quadricep to kind of work in synchronicity together. So what I've been trying to do my whole life, and it was hard because of my car accident, was to take my hamstrings and try to make them as strong as my quads, which is nearly impossible. But that's the focus. And in a 10-year span, it's been close. And I really think that's why my knees and my back have never given me really any real problems, and been able to just hammer squats over the last 30 years where most people would have had to stop the first 5 or 10.
Yeah.
And a lot of that was due to you and Louie and a lot of the other guys that helped me as a kid, or at least in part helped me by reading what you were putting out.
Yeah.
But I was smart enough to listen. And I was like looking at what really impressed me with Westside at first wasn't the strength. I think that's what people get really tuned into. They're like, oh man, look how many world records Louie created. Look, I started looking at how much older those guys were, and they were that much stronger than me. They were lasting, you know, like you were in your mid 30s. And I'm like, that's what I want to be at 35. I don't give a fuck what I can do at 22. Because I met you guys, I was 19.
Yeah.
I was like, if it's going to take me that long to get that strong, I don't care. I like working out and I like the process. I don't like the goal is just something that's secondary. And that's a difficult thing for people to swallow. They want something in 8 weeks or a mesocycle or a 12-week cycle. What Louie taught me is that in spans of months and years, this is where you can go.
That's an interesting take because, like you say, most people, if they're 19, are trying to think of how can I get there the fastest.
The wrong thing to think of.
Yeah. So it's what do you think in your own head allowed you to be able to think this needs to be more long-term, more, phasic is the word I like to use.
Well, I think the biggest roadblocks in my life were also the biggest saviors for that particular reason. When you break your legs at 6 years old and then you're homeschooled in first grade and you can't get out of a hospital bed for a whole year, nothing happens fast. You have to learn to walk again. I remember, it's interesting. My mom's in town. I almost thought about bringing her just to sit her and let you guys hear it. But she reminded me that when I wanted to play t-ball in second grade, when I could finally walk again, I could barely even stride to run. She could hear my legs cracking in the stands. Like when I'm trying to run, because all that shit's so scarred and so it's been in cast for a whole year. And I just forced it. But what I started to realize is I wasn't better than everybody else, and I was going to have to work my ass off if I wanted to be somebody. And the only way that was going to work was if I outlasted people, not if I could beat them out of the ring. Every fucking time. Like I remember going to the first World Championships when I was 19. It was a WDFPF. It was like an IPF affiliate. So the USAPL or ADFPA would allow you to go to that one as well. Yeah. And so I went to that and I won, but I remember it was in the middle of Nebraska, so there wasn't a lot of competition. So I'm thinking, I just won Teenage Worlds. I'm king shit, right? And I guess for my area, I was pretty beefy. But I remember the next year, at 20, I go to my first collegiate nationals and I get second, and I'm so pissed because I'm like, wait a minute, I was just the strongest teenager in the world. Now I'm second place in college. I don't like that. But instead of going, well, screw that guy, whatever, it made me want to work harder. And that's where I started to realize that somebody's always going to be better than me physically, but if I can outsmart them and outlast them, then I will beat them. And so I just played the long game. And so I didn't break my first world record until I was 28. I was in the top 10 for 5 years, but it was just like grind. Because what I like to do is go in and fucking train. The numbers were awesome. Somebody asked you what you bench or whatever, and it's great. But for me, it's knowing that I'll get up and I'll go to the gym while another person sits on their ass and doesn't do shit. That's what made me feel like I was accomplishing something to myself. Because I came from a small town where there wasn't a lot of ways to work your way up. There was no way to stand out. I mean, most of the people I graduated high school with didn't do anything impressive. They were just, your basic run of the mill. I'm going to turn 19, have a kid, get married to somebody I fucking hate, and right?
Yeah.
But the point is like, I didn't want that for myself, but that's kind of where I lived, and that's what was kind of expected, and for me, it was always like, this might be a way out, So that attention a little bit, going back just a hair, got me, to go work with John Torian at the Colts as a job shadower. And I saw the light. And then that's kind of when I met you guys at the first Arnold I went to in 99, 98. And I started coming over there and reading everything I could absorb. And that's when really everything changed. The guys that brought me up at the Y were amazing. And one thing they were really good at is not pushing me too fast. They would always make sure my form was good before I was allowed to go up. I don't ever remember failing a lift until I was 17, and I started training when I was 12. So think about that. How do you make a kid not go till he dies for 5 years? But then
at that age, yes.
At that age. But I was so enamored by their strength. They were so much better than me that why wouldn't I listen? So like Tim Smith, was benching 500 at 181 raw at a local fucking YMCA. And then Jim Dawson pulled 722 in 1970, and I don't think anybody had pulled 800 yet. And so he was in that area considered like one of the best deadlifters of all time. Now, fast forward into my generation, they have long forgotten about. But the point is they could still kick my ass as a young teenager, and one of them was 50 and the other one was 38.
Yeah.
And I'm looking up to him going, I'm just going to listen to what you say because I don't know. So I guess it was great for me to be around people that were so much better than me, so young as I was teachable, where I could learn, and I didn't have too much of an ego. And even when I got stronger than them, I still went back and, hey, what'd you do when you had your elbow hurt or your wrist this? And sometimes they don't know, or they didn't know at the time, but sometimes they did, and they give me whatever information that they learned. But back then it was just a meat fucking grinder,
Yes. And this all plays into the longevity, right? How your process or thought process on the longevity. When in your powerlifting career, at what point in time did that kind of click? It was obviously it was always there, because you're saying that, coming into it, it's a matter of outlasting, which I totally understand that, because me never being at the top of the top, the only way I was ever going to win a nationals was just to be at one that the best guy wasn't at. That was just the fact of the matter. But if you can't get there, you can't be in that spot.
Sure.
Fact of the matter. It's a fact.
I've won a lot of meets for people, one, not lasting, or two, making stupid ass jumps.
Yeah.
And then the strongest guy didn't win because he was too stupid to realize what he was capable of that day. You might have been capable of that 2 weeks ago in your own gym. Now go stand on a ballroom on a rickety fucking platform, which we all have been on before. They'll put these monoliths on these 2.5 foot, 3 foot platforms, and you're walking, you can feel it move with 1,000 pounds. Fucking scary, right? So all those factors start to play into account. And the next thing too is, can you adjust your form? I mean, training with Louis, we trained at parallel. Sometimes you went to APF seniors, they wanted an inch below parallel. How many guys we watched bomb out couldn't adjust? I was fine with dropping my weights down 50 pounds and still kicking somebody's ass.
Yeah.
You go to win the meets. You don't always go to break your totals.
Yes. Now with the longevity piece, say post powerlifting career.
Yeah.
Right. How did your mind, or how do you wrap your mind around first off, how would you define the longevity? Like, people will say, hey, you and Matt talk about longevity. So my first question is, well, what do you mean? How do you define that?
I think any sport, just take powerlifting out of the equation, but it is included. In my opinion, is you have to be able to stay on top or be somewhere around the top for 10 years. That's longevity. And maybe it's not even the top, but you got to stay in some way, shape, or form in your prime way past other people's ability to do so, regardless of what that occasion may be. It could be, you might be doing that because, like for me, it was staying away from external stressors, or not having too stressful of jobs, or not being focused too much on money at first. The other thing with me too, at the longevity standpoint is, and the reason I still do these things that I do now is the fact that I don't like people getting hold of me for information or training knowledge or any of that other shit if I'm not willing to crawl under that fucking shit and do it myself. And I don't care what the age is. Maybe in 10 years, I can't do what I could do, but I'm still going to be doing something. And I will do whatever I can at the highest level I possibly can for as long as I can. Now, it may not be in competing anymore. And really the only reason I don't do meets, people ask me all the time, why don't you compete anymore? I'm not the same person when I compete. You know that.
No, it's different.
I get in the competition mode and it's all that matters. So you think I'm an asshole about answering questions now.
Yeah.
Let me go do a meet for 6 months. It's one of those things where I am a better coach. I'm a better person. I'm more, just more calm when I'm not training for that kind of shit.
I think it occupies more mind space.
Oh my gosh.
When you're competing.
Yeah. And for me, I think if I wanted to stop doing everything now, I've proved what I can do physically. I've proved that I can outlast most everyone. But to me, it's a constant learning process, because now what I find is, how do you adjust all this training for older people? Like,
Yes, that's where I'm going here.
If you're 40, 45 years old, which I'm in that range, if you're at that level and you can still do the things that I can do with the perceived mileage I should have, that to me is someone, even if it wasn't me, someone I would want to listen to.
Yes.
Just based on the fact that where's Matt's injuries? Marginal.
Yes.
Can Matt still outlift 99% of the people that call themselves powerlifters? Yeah, at every lift. Can he be confused, or is he not good at certain exercises that pertain to the big three? Can I bench with kettlebells? Absolutely. I think I might still have the most I've done 5'10" and hanging kettlebells. But like little stuff like that, like you throw me in a camera bar, I'm good at it. Throw me in a safety bar, I'm pretty good at it. Throw me in it doesn't matter.
Yes.
And that's what I think is really the fun part about it now is, if you and I said, hey, fuck this podcast, let's go work out. Let's go do something crazy. Pick any of those of the 100 bars you got, and you and I are both going to be pretty good at it. Yeah,
I would define it as having a certain base to be able to, if a challenge comes up that you come up with, like, I want to see how many times I can bench 315 or squat 520 or block pull, a max,
Sure.
You're in striking range. It's like, okay, here's this base. It may take 6 weeks, it may take 10 weeks, but here's the base to be able to do it. And that base I consider as part of this longevity thing, that you have to have that base to attack from.
Yep.
Whatever it's going to be.
Longevity, in my opinion, comes from the absence or the marginal amount of weaknesses that you have. And that could be in bars, but mostly in muscles. Like, I just got done with that talk I did out in the East Coast, and Mike Boyle was there. He's a massive isolateral guy. He showed me all these papers on it, and we were talking, but he was also very respectful of how I do things. And he also has seen me do isolateral movements. So he knows that I take into account what he's talking about. But the thing of it is, what I found interesting was that he was very understanding of the limitations of that for bilateral strength if you're going to compare it. But also I was interested in the transferability of what he was talking about to my stuff.
Yes.
So longevity also is being able to take cues from people that may have a different view than you. But I consider Mike Boyle like us. He's an equal. Like, he has been around for 35, 40 years. He's trained thousands of athletes to pro careers. Those are the kind of guys that I like to have real deep training discussions with, because he'll learn something from me and I'll learn something from him. So that's really what I strive to find now is like, okay, I've got this base knowledge and my ideas are pretty intricate, but like they still fit into a lot of other people's thought processes, and they could be totally utilized for whatever you want to do it for, if you know where your particular shortcomings are.
Yes. So for those people that don't have that base, right, we're fortunate, disfortunate, however you want to define it, to have 30 years of powerlifting help create that base, but that's not enough for that base for what we're talking about now. For that base that I'm talking about, if I wanted to walk in a 5K, like, I've done it, I'll never do it again until it's hot and it was with my kid at the zoo and shit like that. It can be done. It's not like, oh shit, I can't do this. Or if I want to, go after a max on a safety bar.
Yeah, I think that's where you kind of put longevity # adaptability.
Yes.
The base allows you to have longevity, but the base also equally attacks adaptability. So if I decide to change, say I want to go for reps instead of maxes, or I have that. I have that ability to adapt, and that is true athleticism.
Yes.
The ability to adapt, people bust on Jordan all the time for leaving basketball and going to baseball. But what they don't realize is he was progressing so fast in baseball. If he'd have played another couple of years, he would have started.
Yes.
And that is amazing to do at that level. I mean, and that's the thing is he's a professional sport. That's adaptability. That's longevity. That's
well, there may be a lot of people that they lost that base. Say they trained for 10, 15 years, then they haven't trained for 5 years. And now they've been training for 6 months or a year, trying to get back into just having that base, or they just don't have that base. Yeah. So what would be some recommendations or ideas or thoughts for them to be able to help build that base up? It's a huge question. I get that. But so for instance, some of the shortfalls that I'll see with it is they do too much.
Yeah.
Like they come in right away, they find some bodybuilding program, they're doing 10 exercises per day. Yeah. Within a month, they're burned out. They can't do shit.
Or they think that they're at the level that they left.
Good point.
That's another major problem, I think that would be the number one thing is, okay, this is what I was, but what you don't realize is 5 years internally to you is not near as long as it is to your body.
Yeah.
But your mind still thinks that that's what's capable. And it is in time. But in that time is genetics. So some people could train 6-8 weeks and get back to where they were 5 years ago. I mean, that's pushing it. But let's just say, but some people, it might take 2 more years.
Yeah.
So, and I think a lot of that comes from the stimulation of physical activity that you had between the ages of 4 and 20. Because that's when the body's adapting to the environment. If you want to help a kid, say, that has walking issues, you don't wait till they're 20. That's a bad time to start. When did they start Olympic weightlifting in the Soviet Union and China? 5, 6 years old. They're not lifting, but they're teaching them dowel rods. They're getting them flexible. Because if they wait 10 more years, it's an uphill battle that may not be won. So I think a lot of how active you are when you can't control that, i.e. when you're the child, not the parent, and then as that raises up, you might be able to take 2, 3, 4, 5 years off and come right back to where you were in a very short period of time. But that's usually not the person asking that question. They got into lifting weights in college. Then at 24, 25, they decided to have kids and have a family. Yeah. And now they want to start back at 35 or 40 and where they left off, which is not going to happen. So the big thing that I think you would have to do in that scenario would be, one, to develop work capacity. So I wouldn't necessarily focus as much on the core lifts. I would focus on getting in shape. And what I mean by that is kettlebell swings, nothing. If you can't do it for 25, don't do it. And this doesn't last for long, but it definitely, that anaerobic capacity is the bridge gap between endurance and strength, but it's also the preservation tool. And if you read a lot of the old Soviet books that Medvedev and them guys talked about, that's what they talked about all the time. They'd get done with a big core contest, say the Olympics, and then the next 6 or 8 weeks was all GPP base. It really didn't look like Olympic lifting, although it was transferable to keep the stimulation going, but change the stimulus enough to where it wouldn't burn them out again. And so that's what you have to do. You kind of have to earn the right to go back to train. You need to reassess weaknesses. Okay, how much worse did my hamstrings get? Glutes. And some of that's anthropometric. So like how you're built, those will always be your weaknesses, but they also must always be your focus point. So even in the beginning, when you start back up, 70% of your thought process needs to be to those skeletal weaknesses to make sure that posture and corrective muscle balance happens before compound lifts occur. And that also can be from left to right. So if I have a left to right imbalance, that needs to be as corrected as possible before bilateral training can really occur, which Boyle is absolutely correct. If my left is 20% weaker than my right, if I get that to 5%, I'm ready to bilateral do movements. But if that lagging point stays there, it either comes back as an injury or it comes back as a technical flaw, which usually is an injury. So you can either fix it in the short term and do it healthy, or you can fix it in the long term after an injury. So I guess that answers the question in a 360-degree view.
Yes.
But the next thing is instead of worrying about training first, let's say you've been sedentary, don't worry about training as much as what your diet look like, what your sleep look like, what your recovery means and your stress levels look like. Make an honest picture of what you're capable of coming back to. If you're only eating 1 meal a day and you're sleeping 3 hours a day, you're not going to train like you and I train.
Yeah.
You just have to be honest with yourself. But if you have all those other parameters, maybe fix that shit first, then start thinking about what you're going to do with your fitness protocol. Get healthy, get your sleep, get all that dialed, and then add in the training. if I were to say that to anybody, obviously three quarters of people wouldn't listen, but I would say, why wait and fix that when you hit a road bump in training, when if you fixed it in the first place, you'd never hit the road bump?
Well, you assume that there's two reasons why they're going to come back to train, either because they love to train or because they have to train, right? So some physical thing happened, heart attack, whatever it's going to be, they have to train. So the things that you just lifted off are major lifestyle factors that contribute to many of the leading causes of death, right?
Exactly.
So, and it would be easier to fix sleep, before the training and the nutrition and so forth.
Absolutely. Unhealthy is only strong for a short period of time. And if you're trying to come back to training at 35, 40 years old, you probably ought to be putting health in front of strength, and then strength will come. If you do it the opposite way, you're just setting your time clock up to go to the grave. You can get away with that shit when we were in our prime over at Louis, at 22, and Louis like, fuck that, just take some more energy drinks and let's train harder. Yeah, that works when you're 24. At 34, 44, that's not the right way to go.
When did your wake up call come with nutrition? Because we all go through it, right? It's like you get away with it for a while, right? And then at a certain point, it's like, oh shit, that's what my blood work says.
Yeah, there was two major road bumps, and they all came after Westside, obviously.
Yeah.
Because at Westside you just try to survive. But about 29, 30, 31 was the first big fuck moment. I'm friends with Serrano, we all are, and Serrano's like, you need to come in and do your blood work. I'm like, fuck that shit, whatever. And but anyway, I just end up going, maybe I need to see where I'm at. I was not having sleeping issues, but I was getting sinus infections every couple times a year, and I'm blaming it on what's outside, and I'm not thinking gluten and processed dairy and all this inflammation in my stomach and all the shit that Serrano's really known for. And Serrano looks at me at about, it was around 32 maybe, and he goes, look, I can keep you this big and this strong for maybe another 3 or 4 years the way you're going. We can take some of this medication, this and this, or you can take no medication. You can listen to what the fuck I'm telling you about eating cleaner, and you can be just as strong or stronger, and I can keep you like this until you're in your 50s. Which one do you want to do? It wasn't like he was telling me this is the only way. I'll show you the other way too, but that's your own scenario. And I'm like, you know what? I'd already broke a handful of records, and I'm like, let's see how I can do this healthy, because what I started to notice is that when you look unhealthy and you're strong, nobody cares. When you're fit and healthy and you look athletic and you got a little bit less body fat and you look like you actually do lift instead of just a national hot dog eating champion, people start to go, wow, that's really interesting. So I start to notice the diet is more tied into the aesthetic property. Now the health is important too, but we run a business, and look how much business helped you when you leaned out the first time. A lot, because now people are like, oh shit, this guy knows about this too. But the health thing was huge for me because my dad died at 43. I'll be 43 in a month and a half. And I didn't want to do that, and my dad was exposed to Agent Orange in Vietnam and had an odd cancer, but he also lived like shit. I mean, ate unhealthy. He was just a meathead, badass trucker, just, like a Bull Hurley type deal, you know what I mean? Yeah. So for me, really, you he wanted to kick your ass, even sitting down eating. And so, long story short, so Serrano starts telling me, hey, look, you're allergic to this, this, and this, take it out. So that was the first step. And I think that's when you saw me start to get leaner. So I went from being 312, 314 to about 295, but I started looking jacked. That was way after the Think You Could Squat series where I looked like a State Puff Marshmallow Man. So this was about 2014. When I hit the raw stuff, I start realizing, okay, the diet needs to be there. This extra weight's not helping me any. Extra weight will help you in gear. Equipment, bench shirts and shit.
Yeah.
But they don't help you raw, in my opinion. But anyway, so 2016, I get this really weird email. Maybe it was a DM on Instagram. It was Charles Poliquin. I was doing a seminar in Colorado Springs, and Charles lives in Monument, which is kind of right in between Denver and Colorado. It's about 30 minutes away. He's like, hey, this is Charles Poliquin. I live in the area that you're doing a seminar. I'd love to come and listen if you don't mind. It's very respectful. And I'm like, fuck, this guy wants to come listen to me talk. I had to read his shit in high school. I was reading his shit in high school and college. This dude's a fucking man, right? He shows up, and he's way shorter than I thought he was. He's like 5'6" if he's lucky, but just a genius. And he's looking at me up and down, and first thing we started talking about was the dynamic method. And he goes, I haven't used that a whole lot, because he kind of came from bodybuilding. He did a lot of tempos, ISO holds, which I'd never used before. So some of that stuff you'll see in the manuals. A lot of that came from Paul Quinn. But he was like, let me do a bioprint on you. I'm like, what the fuck is that? So he's like, he gets his calipers out and does like a 14-site skin fold on me. He's like, these are where your inflammation points are. This is what you need to change in your diet. Ironically, it was the same shit that Serrano was telling me from a completely different scenario. So he's telling me this with blood work, and he's telling me this with inflammation calipers. So I'm going back home with all this. So Charles, take this, supplement that. You're deficient in magnesium, you're deficient in this. So boom, 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 boom. He gets me hooked up with ATP, which, gets supplements out of Canada. They're super high medical grade. I take that, and within, I shit you not, 4 months, I had dropped probably another 4 and 5% body fat and put on 2-3 pounds of muscle on the DEXA. And I'm like, oh my God, what if I'd have known about this 10 years ago? So now I'm like 292. I got veins popping out. I'm benching 611 raw, squatting the world records and shit. And that's when I started to realize full circle at about 36 that the nutrition was tying into the strength. And if I'd have known that 10 years earlier, it would have been a completely different scenario. But I think you learn things in the time in which it was important or you need to learn them. So when I was a kid, I felt that I mastered volume, intensity, and technical proficiency. That alone takes a lifetime. But I felt by 26, 27, you had seen me lift. I never was a technically not good lifter.
No sound. Yeah.
Everything looked great. So now what's the next thing to learn? So again, you got to start somewhere. Some people start with nutrition. Maybe that's a better way for you. Maybe that's your interest or your passion. Then it leads you into weights. Then it leads you into this. For me, I was just a static. I wanted to read and study as much as I could about technical proficiency, percentages, and reps, and what was optimal. That led me into Soviet system training, Louis stuff. But then there was these big holes, and I think my biggest gun in my pocket that really I could use against everybody else was I was always an early sleeper. I was dead tired even when I was a kid at 8:30. I never liked to stay up late. If I stayed up past 10, I felt hungover. So I always wanted to go to sleep. Maybe that was a car accident. Maybe I don't know what that was. But the fact of the matter was I was always wanting to sleep 8, 9, 10 hours when I was younger, if I could. And when I could as an older adult and could pick my work schedule, because I know we both worked at Capital Club for quite a while. I didn't work till evenings. And so I could sleep in. I could go home and take a nap. That's when I noticed that was all full circle. Once I had my sleep down, my nutrition down, and the understanding of what worked for me on rep sets and volume, it was like having, 3 of the biggest guns in the world to utilize.
You think it's, because this is kind of how I think about it for myself, is I didn't have to think about it that much because I was in a calorie surplus most of the time. So my needs were being met with a surplus of Pop-Tarts and other shit on top of it. Thus, you're all bloated. So I'm recovering because I'm still fulfilling those needs. But as you get older, your body's not going to tolerate the sugar and some of the other shit as much. Or when you want to start to get leaner, all of a sudden, you're not going to have this surplus anymore. You're going to start stripping it down. And then when it comes down, it has to become more optimal. Like training, I suppose. Like you can do a ton of training when you're younger and get away with it. Right. But then when you get older, it's like every single thing has to have a reason here. If it doesn't have a reason, it's working against me.
The energy expenditure has to match what your goal is. And if that energy expenditure is not really helping that goal, it's a huge deal. But something to kind of hit on what you're talking about is when you're younger, maybe those extra calories work, but maybe they're also working against you, because if you listen to Charles or Serrano, you have high inflammation. You don't make good natural testosterone anyway. So now your hormones are working against you. You might be getting a calorie amount that you need, but now hormonally your body's in shambles because sugars and trans fats and all these other process problems are going to cause major issues underlying. So even though you're getting calories, what's the calories coming with? And that's if it's joint inflammation and your stomach's always pissed off, so now you're not absorbing food correctly, is it really working for you? Who knows? And the answer is, I would say it wouldn't be. So if you could figure out how to eat cleaner, but that's the hardest part. If you want to be super big, how do you do that on clean food? I ask Stan that all the time, and Stan goes, you just have to increase your frequency of cheat meals, but most of your meals are still clean.
What do you mean?
So what I would do when I was trying to stay 295 is I would have a cheat meal every 72 hours. Whatever I wanted to eat, I ate in 72 hours. But that's one meal out of 12 or 14. And then if I wanted to get leaner, I would have a cheat meal every 5 days. So every 90 something hours. See?
Yeah.
So it's the extent in which how long you go with those massive surplus eats. Instead of eating like that all the time, you get sensitive to it. So now if I eat real clean for 3 days and then I pop in a monster after a hard squat day or a hard bench day, now I pop in a 4,500 calorie day. As long as it's absorbable, my body's going to go, fuck, boom, right? So you can overdo everything. You can overdo training. You can overdo calories. But if you time it, you know, if you look at The Rock, like he's real good about that. He eats super clean all week and then he posts these hogger cheat meals. Now, maybe that's just marketing, but maybe it's smarts too, because if it's planned in, that might be making him put on some more muscle or keep it in his 50s.
Would you put that after you said after a monster training day, right?
Yeah.
So say you have a huge, you know, your squat, for instance, well, that's a different example, but something like your squat, but not that squat, because that's a different, you're probably still recovering from that. That's going to take a long time. A hard day.
Yeah, a normal hard day.
Would the cheat meal go after that?
Yeah. I really believe that your body is sensitive like a sponge after doing that extreme level of training. I think the reason you don't see as much data on it is because they're not studying guys like you and me that have that real ability to go balls out. You can't tell me that you can take a recreationally trained kid that's never benched probably 225, make him go through a strenuous workout, and he's going to have the same hormonal response to a heavy meal that you and I would. Impossible. So that's where I think you really have to look at, you know, and that's what my master's degree really opened me up to. Was one of the first classes I had with Dr. Newton is we had lit review class. And basically what we did is we brought in about, I'd say at least 200 papers in that semester. And we went over in a class on what was wrong with them, not what it was proving. Here's what's wrong with the sample size. Here's what's wrong with who they used. Here's what's wrong with the questionnaire. And then you start to realize, like, holy shit, all of this stuff is you can take with a grain of salt. So really the people should be listening to are guys that have been doing it for years, because they somehow figured out something that worked for them. Now, maybe it won't work for you, but maybe it will. But I find when I read studies on strength training, I don't really see a lot of validation in them just because of the sample that they're using. Go use somebody that's already maxed their potential. Now show me a 5% gain. Don't show me somebody that's never worked out before and you said 3 sets of 10 work because this guy's arms went from 10 inches to 10 and a half. Show me go from 20 to 20 and a half. Yeah. That's a bitch. Because now you better have everything right. Because the guy to get to the 20 inches probably already has those variables figured out.
When you were leaving Serrano's office, and I'm intrigued by this because I had the same conversation with him. Like, what were you thinking when you were driving back, or after he called you and yelled at you because it was all fucked up? Because he's gonna, you know, he's telling you your markers, right? And some of them you're like, fuck, okay, it's not good. What's going through your mind at that time?
It was like a gut check. I mean, you know, and this is hard to explain, but for me it makes sense because people are like, what is he talking about? When I graduated high school, I weighed 250, and I was already pretty big kid for, you know, 250. So people are like, oh, he's a genetic freak. It took me 6 years to weigh 280 with anything I wanted to eat under the sun. I was maxed. And then it took me another 4 years to weigh 300. People are like, oh, well, he's already big. Dude, you don't realize it took me that long to weigh that. Drugs or not. That's how long it took me to weigh that. And it was one of those things where you're just like, holy shit, you know, like this I'm a hard gainer. Everybody's a hard gainer once they get to a genetic limit.
At a certain point, 100%, yeah.
Yeah, if you weigh 140 and you're not supposed to weigh 165, it's going to be a bitch to weigh 165. If you're like me and graduate high school at 250, it might take you 6 or 8 years to weigh 300 to do it semi right. So now I'm just walking home, and I put so much energy and time and thought into reps and sets and technical. And now I've realized that I've just opened up another Pandora's box and I don't know shit. And now I got to study all this. Yeah, I had advanced master's nutrition classes, but you and I both know that don't teach you what Serrano and Poliquin know. No. It's completely off the chart. So it's almost like I think the average person might get into that. That's not a studier or a person that's passionate about every little aspect of what they want to do. They could look at that as monotonous and go, I just can't handle this much information. I'm fucking done. I'm just going to stick with what I do. For me, it's like, okay, let's 5% at a time, 5% at a time. in 5 years, that's, it's a 60%, 80% change because I've fixed all these little areas and now I feel so much better. And now I haven't lost any strength, which is exactly what Serrano was telling me. You don't need these shit calories. You need the right amount and you need from the right things. And once I figured that out, my body was, instead of trying to stress 7 cylinders, I'm on 8 now,
So you took one path, I took the other. Same conversation, same path. It's like, for me, it's like, fuck it, I got 2 more years anyhow.
Yeah.
Just full throttle and keep doing what I'm doing. Then we'll fix it afterwards.
Yeah.
You decided to go the other way or the other route. Why?
I don't know. I think a lot of it for me is I was always used to trying to outlast people.
Yeah.
And for me, I wanted to be able to do really crazy shit in my 40s. For me, it was a lifestyle thing. I didn't have this shelf life.
Yeah.
But I also didn't have plans for a family. I didn't have plans for kids. So for me, I was like, yeah, I think I can get everything the way I want it to be at 45, not 33. I think that becomes, I just never felt like I had a shelf life, like 2 years. I never looked at it that way. I don't even feel like I'm 42. I just feel like I just keep evolving what I'm trying to do, but that takes a lot of selfishness in my lifestyle. My business and my training is what I do. And so I feel like if I'm going to tell somebody else to do something, I need to live it at 100 miles an hour. And I think that's a lot of what's wrong with our society this day. Everybody wants to be an expert without bleeding. Everybody wants to be an expert without going to pay 6 figures and go to a good school where they're going to make you push out of your comfort zone. That's one of the biggest things you can get from a higher level university where they truly are trying to teach you versus ooh and ah you with buildings and all the things that they do. I think the teachers will push you out of your comfort zone and teach you that you have to keep driving and keep learning, and that's life. And once you stop trying to do that and you think you know everything and you think you're the strongest you're ever going to be, or you give yourself a time limit, you've already set your own clock. Yeah.
And you got to continuously be the dumbest person in the room, find people who are smarter, even if you disagree.
Yeah.
Like, I think you just kind of said you just did that. You talk to some people you disagree with, you find commonality, then you can learn some things.
Yeah.
It may not change your overall philosophy. I doubt it will, but it can add to it and thus add to them. Where I think a lot of people, as they get older in this industry, their bias just becomes, it becomes more than a bias.
Yeah.
It becomes like this rock solid thing that can't be penetrated, can't be taught, can't be learned. It can't grow. A rock can't grow.
The hardest part is you got to figure out who to take that information from. And the better you get at that. So I find that, I don't mind having a disagreement with Boyle on bilateral and unilateral. He's earned the right to have his opinion. But that's the biggest problem I think we have right now is we don't earn our rights to have opinions on what we think is right or wrong. If you think something's right, I appreciate that opinion. Now go live that fucking shit for 20 years and come back to me. That's what I did with my stuff. I went and experimented with what I thought was right for my whole fucking life to see that I stand on what I believe. But some people argue with you. I'm like, how much do you train? How long you been training? Well, 6 months. So I got to use Chico programs. You see what I'm saying? Like you don't have a right to have an opinion on that area. You can have your own opinion, and that's fine. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying if you want to go talk to somebody else that's a professional that has literally, donated their entire life like you and I, think about that and step back for a minute. Because I don't go and talk to a neurosurgeon like I know what the hell I'm talking about. I don't go talk to an open heart surgeon. They went to school for that, and I haven't studied it enough to have an opinion. And I think the older you get, you start to realize, like, don't argue with people about stuff like that. It's like politics, I have my views on certain things, but I don't know enough of what's going on to have an opinion. I don't think anybody does. They hide so much shit from us anyway.
Yeah.
So people get all pissed off about these different areas that they really don't even know about. And it just creates more confusion. And now everybody has a voice on the internet. I think it was better when there was just a handful of people that had, noise put out on magazines and TVs. Now, in some ways,
there's pros and cons. I mean, I'm thinking because there's so much low hanging information that it's easy to find the low hanging information. It's everywhere, right? That wasn't always the case, right? But it also forced you to have to learn how to go deeper, or seek out the right people, because if you had to drive 3 hours, to learn how to squat, You weren't going to drive 3 hours to talk to somebody that you weren't really damn sure could help you.
Yeah. But you're more than willing to spend an hour on the internet on your phone studying somebody that may or may not know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And that's a big problem I think we have, is I just wish we had a kind of a pecking order where guys like you and I were even more popular and had earned our right to give other people information. Because I find that a lot of times stuff that's out there, it's not right. And it's hard to battle that when you're trying to give out the right information,
I think that, just to push back a little, I think the longer people are in it, if they're serious about it, they find it. But the bulk of the industry and the people that train don't train for more than 2 years anyhow.
No.
So the surface level crap that they're getting from all those other people is way, way, way wider.
Yep.
And they can do financially way, way, way better. It's a lot bigger.
Yeah.
But after 2-3 years, it's those same people, if you talk to anyone that's been doing this for 10 years now, how did you get into this, right? Mm-hmm. And you're going to hear, well, X, and they don't listen to those people anymore. Why? Well, they found out the shit only worked for about a year, which is about how every newbie is going to make progress for about a year. Yep. And then they find the better sources, as it goes up through. It's frustrating, because, there's the finance, for a lot of reasons, it's frustrating because of that. Yeah. And then you don't want to market yourself like an asshat, is what we would call them. Yeah. To be able to get that. But it's a weird fucking thing.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the fix is. I mean, I don't think Louis would have ever tried to put the information to you or me that he did if we had already proved that we were there for fucking action. I mean, I showed up already benching 500 and squatting 700 as a kid. He knew I had the drive. And that was a big thing. I mean, the first year, I'd say at least 6 months you were there, you were being interviewed. You weren't in the gym yet. You were interviewed to see what you was going to be like when the fucking throttle got turned on, and I think that's missing right now, and that's the hardest part is people want to know what you took 20 years to bleed and they just want you to hand it to them. But what they don't realize is if you're not ready for that information, you can't use it.
Well, they won't use it.
And they won't use it.
Yeah, they won't use it because they're not going to understand. They're not going to see any value in it anyhow.
Exactly.
From that whole point to pivot a little bit, the overhead press we asked last time, and what's your thoughts on the overhead?
Well, okay, so we did a pretty detailed video on that on Patreon because it took us about 10 hours to put it together. But so I'm in graduate school and I'm working on my first cadaver, and I had a fairly young guy that was dead, and we were stripping them all down and we were filleting the shoulder. And I had this orthopedic surgeon that was retired, and he was teaching the class, and I'm looking at the shoulder joint and I'm asking him all kinds of questions. And my first taste of that was he was telling me that almost all the shoulder surgeries that he ever had to do were involving either a job or a sport that required an overhead position. And I said, well, why is that? And he goes, I'll show you tomorrow in class. So I stay after for about an hour and a half, and he's got this whole cadaver shoulder peeled open, and he shows me the joint in a completely overhead position. You see this right here and here? I'm like, yeah. He goes, the shoulder is eating itself alive in this position. It will let it do it, but it's got a lot of damage to it to do that. That's really interesting because, Ed Cohen was talking about doing a lot of overhead presses for his bench. Same thing with Kazmaier. And then I run into, I've been friends with Eddie for, 20 years and probably Kaz 10, and both of them shoulders are messed up. And I started to realize like a lot of the guys that, not always, not every once in a while, guys skate through. Michael Hearn believes in overhead pressing, and me and him are great friends. I don't believe in it based on the fact of what I've seen the anatomy do. And I think that there is a better way to get stronger if bench pressing or something of that nature. Now, if strongman's your thing or Olympic lifting is your thing, you're not going to get away from it. But I would say that for at least half of those particular sports, it's a massive shoulder problem that knocks them out. And a lot of it's because of those motions are not good for mileage. So in my opinion, if we're talking to the guys 40, 45 years old, or the guys that are like you and me and they're 20 right now, find exercises that get you the biggest bang for your buck, meaning the least amount of mileage. And if an orthopedic surgeon is telling me that this position is damaging the joint, and it's not worth the mileage, then why do it all the time? So you'll see on my videos, I'll do very extreme inclines. I've done 150s for 20 reps. But the point is that I only use it for a week or two a year. But why can I do 300 for 20 seated and I don't train the movement, it's because I don't have the weaknesses. So there's a way to get strong at military presses without doing it. I'll give you a case in point. I got an amateur strongman at my gym. We call him Moose. He's one of the diesel mechanics over at Reichert. He's 6'5", 350. He's huge. He has to do overhead log pressing. We do no overhead log pressing. I get him stronger at tricep pushdowns, crossbody tricep extensions, JM presses. He goes and he breaks his all-time record 3 times in a row on exercises in strongman without doing it.
Any specific deltoid work, or you just leave that to the lats and
lots of
work?
face pulls, tons of face pulls for structural integrity. Now, I initially did that because I wanted a massive shelf for a back squat, but what I started to realize was it protecting my shoulder. So every once in a while, I'll go in. My mom's a nurse practitioner. She has some pretty good connections at the VA, and I'll let them do some x-rays on me just to see if I got some mileage coming or what's going on. The doctor comes back and goes, how much do you fucking bench? I said, I've done over 600 multiple times. He goes, your shoulder spacing's amazing. That's because I do 2 times the back work to front work, and I don't do military presses very often. He goes, everybody I've seen that trains similar to you, probably not your strength level, they all got grenaded shoulders from those particular exercises. So whatever you're doing is right. Again, it's kind of like when Stan, it's hard to refute Stan's ideas on diet when he shows you his blood work.
Yeah.
When I go in and get x-rays and my shoulder looks healthy at 42 from the shit that I've done, I'm not going to listen to the argument about it.
Yeah.
Because everybody telling me that it's good for them, I don't see them lasting more than 2 to 4 years. And so for me, it's finding the exercises that make you strong, get you maybe the look that you want, but try not to damage the joint in that time, because those joints don't heal back like muscles do. And so you have to be very careful with skeletal mileage, because skeletal mileage is permanent. You know, so even if there's a 20% chance that military presses are not that great for you and you don't need them as your specific training modality as a sport, why the fuck would you do them?
Well, that would be with any movement, you know.
I know. That's what I'm trying to tell people. I'm like, I'm not saying that military presses thrown in every once in a while isn't a bad deal, but you know as well as I do is that people like, well, you don't squat like Tom Platz. Well, you don't squat like Louis Simmons. Well, you don't do military presses. I can do all of those if I want to. But where I'm strongest is where I'll stay. And then I play with those at time that I know that don't create mileage.
Yeah. Well, they're not saying you don't do concentration curls.
Yeah.
You know, they don't say you're not doing wrist curls. They don't say, you see what I'm saying? So there's certain movement, you know, it's the internet, right?
Well, the problem is that if you use the exact same motor pattern too long, the problem is everybody thinks that if they're Olympic squatting, that's the only way they squat. They don't squat like you and I. And then if they only squat like we were taught by Louis and Chuck, then that's the only way they squat. They can't come in narrow and let their knees go over their toes and be any good. That's wrong. But the point is don't focus on that exact same motor pattern all the time, or you're going to get mileage. Figure out how to stimulate those areas without creating that specific mileage from that one motor pattern.
Talk a little bit more about changing the squat stance, because I think people miss that.
Well, that's huge. So I will do a lot. I mean, now that I'm older and I keep the mileage off my spine, I do a lot of different stances on my belt squat. So I'll do like elevated heel and super narrow. I'll let my knees go as far over my toes as I can without my heels coming off the ground. I'll go ultra wide, even farther than I normally squat, which is getting harder as I get older, which is what Stan will tell you why he moved into more of like a rip toe style squat, which I try to tell him to not do, but my fuck, dude, right? I don't know how you become an expert at squatting when you know your squat's not even a decent bench, but whatever. So, and like I said, I don't have any ill will to him, but fuck it, you know what I mean? I'm going to call it like it is. So, so the thing of it is like, you have to rotate those movements, because if one of them's weaker than the other, it's telling you that something's wrong. Now, the high bar Olympic style knees over toe squat is going to be weaker than the way we train, but it's not easier to learn. It's actually more simple, because it's all the dominant muscle groups. So if you squat that way, you're going to create a lot of different weaknesses. Your hamstrings are going to falter. Your glutes aren't going to be as strong. And most people that like to squat that way are built to squat that way.
Well, if the movement's already inherently weaker, right? Yeah. So the close stance, you know, sissy squat type of thing, then how do they know if it's a weakness or not? Because if they're going to compare it to the regular squat, obviously it's going to be weaker. Yeah,
they don't, because it takes so long to master all of them. Like, I don't feel that I could have been put in any squat and done fairly well until I was about 30. So it meant about 16 years of training. So that just cut 97% of people that like lifting weights right out of the bucket. But we need to attack it from a different mindset, which is we need to figure out Where do we hit these squats and get the most benefit with the least amount of mileage? That's what's not being said. So what you need to do is rotate due to mileage. Now, the specific way to get better at something is to practice the exact same thing over and over and over again. But the problem with that is there's a payment for that.
Yeah.
But if you can rotate it in a smart fashion, find the weakest links, like I did with that 520 for 25. I didn't do 500 for 10 and then 12 and then 15 then 18. Some people would do that. But by the time they got to 20, they'd already be injured or they'd be burned out. So you saw how I told you how to do it. And so that's just being smarter at trying to stimulate and not annihilate. And that's what you should be doing with your motor patterns, changing your foot stances. If you're 200 pounds weaker with your feet 3 inches narrower, it's a problem.
No, yeah.
If you're 200 pounds weaker, 6 inches wider, that's a problem. So you got to put those in, I would say 50% of the time. The ones that you're not good at need to be the shining stars of your workout until they're not, and then go find the next weak spot. So for me, when I was squatting the humongous, 1,200 pounds in gear, the safety bar was my nemesis. Because when I was squatting with immense pressure on safety bar, I already had a taller torso being 6'1". So if I use the safety bar correctly, not lifting up on the, I put chains on mine so that when I go like this, it doesn't do anything. It just wants to rip my fucking head off. When I put the bar back down, seemingly it felt 6 inches lower. My torso was 6 inches shorter. So now it's like boom, right? Super strong.
They're a closer stance with that too?
I tried to match that stance in where I was weakest at that point because I didn't understand about all that rotation, but I did in the off season. So when I started to compete and get ready, everything became specific, but only for 8 weeks. The rest of that time was generalities and then weaknesses and figuring out where they were. By the time you get 8-10 weeks out from a meet, you got what you got. Now you got to polish. All you can do is polish. You can't build a new car, but you can clean it and polish it. And so your off season where you get stronger, and your comp season is when you polish. I think a lot of people have that backwards. They think that they're getting stronger as they get ready for a meet. If your thought process is that, you are already in the shit because you're going to overtrain, and now you're probably not going to do what you want to do at the meet.
Yes.
My hardest training is 30 weeks out.
Well, the other problem they run into is if they don't start at that 10-week point, 12-week point, wherever their prep point is, exactly where it should be, which percentages are variant. They're fucked. Yep. Because either they're gonna overreach and not be able to get to the meet.
So I'll give you guys tips for that. So what I would do and this is a very big ego kick in the dick, right? When I got ready for a comp, so I'll give you an example. I go to Raw Unity. You were there. I go to Raw Unity. I break the all-time world record in the squat. Then I hit 606, which was the biggest bench as a full meat lifter at that meet. Milanichev, all those guys. When I went home, I based my bench off of 585 and I based my squat off of 810. That's what I based the percentages off of. I knocked 5% off to train because that always made sure I was going to recover. But I could have done it the opposite way, which we've seen 1,000 times, which is, hey, I just squatted 832, pretty easy. I'm going to base everything off of 850. I didn't. I based it off of 810. Then I went to the next meet and squatted 870. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'm always in a recuperative fashion. I'm always delaying what I think I'm capable of in order for me to recover. Delay equals recover, but problem is ego. And on timelines, if you say like what you said, fuck it, I only got 2 years left. I'm going to the hammer. I'm putting the hammer down. That's not going to let you put the hammer down. It's going to turn the governors on. And now you're going to get weaker. You have to trick the body into getting stronger by giving it only the optimal amount, sometimes less than optimal, maybe 1% or 2%, so that the restoration processes can always occur. You can't train what you can't recover from. And that's what everybody needs to be thinking about when they're laying out their cycles. Can I recover from this? It's not, this is going to get me this strong. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But if you can't recover from it, there's no way you're going to see if it did or it didn't.
Then the biggest factors that plays into the recovery is the programming of the training. You need to put that out there.
Right.
And then we talked about the sleep, the nutrition.
Huge.
Those things kind of play into that as well. And one of the things that I see where people fucking up is recovery hacks. And they have their place. Like if you get behind the 8 ball, you got to have something. To be able to get you through. But the recovery hacks, they're using them all the time.
Recovery hacks, I think there are a few. I don't like saying hacks.
I don't know what else to call it.
But I know what you're saying. So we'll call it hacks. most people are deficient in magnesium. Magnesium is not only control of insulin, but it's also control of depth of sleep and muscle relaxation for recovery processes. You got to be able to go into the gym, smack the muscle in the ass, and then turn it off and let it heal. The more magnesium you have in your system that you can tolerate, the better that process happens and the faster it happens. So I'm always a huge fan of taking multiple amounts of magnesium, 1,000 milligrams at least, about 7:30, and I'm always in bed laying down and relaxing by about 8:15.
What do you mean by tolerate?
Well, the problem is that some people can't take more than, say, 700 milligrams in one sitting, or it makes them just shit their pants.
All right.
But a lot of that has to do with the quality of the magnesium as well. Glycinate, magnesium combined with glycine, actually helps that process to not only absorb but not become a stool softener. You know, when you go to the doctor and you can't shit, they're going to give you magnesium citrate. Mm-hmm. Well, in an hour, you're going to be on the toilet fucking ripping your guts out. Magnesium glycinate, when it's combined with glycine, helps the absorption process and has a different property. So what I find is that if you get high quality magnesium, you can tolerate more without that happening, but magnesium can be a stomach irritant. Mm-hmm. So the optimal amount is different for everyone. You just got to kind of play with it. I can take about 1,000 milligrams. My body runs squeaky clean. I sleep good. Everything is perfect. My digestive system doesn't get pissed off, but other people are very different. The other big thing is turning, we're always surrounded by this. Mm-hmm. Blue light is another huge recovery hack. It's actually an anti-hack. It's actually a fuck up. So if you're watching TV right before you go to bed, or you can't get off your computer before you go to bed, or you can't get off your phone until 11:30 at night, you're delaying the body's ability to recover, because blue light tells the brain to turn back on. It thinks the sun's back out. It's tricking the body into thinking it's not nighttime. So at my house, I don't turn a lot of lights on. When it's dark, that means I should have been in bed. Mm-hmm. Most of the time. I mean, obviously when it's the winter and it gets dark here at 5 o'clock, it's a little tough to do. But you know what I mean? Like now at this time of year, the sun goes down at 9 o'clock. So if I don't have all my shit done by 9 o'clock, then I've not done something right that day. Mm-hmm. So my point is follow that circadian rhythm, let your body sleep. The next thing you can do is wake up early and get into the sun a little bit for 10 or 15 minutes right before you go to work. That's telling the body to wake up, which your body works on a clock. So if you get up and you get out and see sunlight, and all you ever are is in the dark and in the artificial light at work, and then you don't see light when you get out, you just go right back in your car and go back home, or maybe even the gym, but there's just not real light. That can mess up your circadian rhythm as well. And that's in my opinion, some of the biggest sleep hacks. Avoid blue light after, say, 7:30 or 8. Take an optimal amount of magnesium, maybe go get a blood test and see if you're deficient in it. And when I mean deficient, you know how medical levels are. They're this huge range. You always want to try to be in the higher range on that stuff. You don't want to be at the lowest range of testosterone, and you don't want to be at the lowest levels of magnesium, even if it's normal. You want to be in the higher ranges of some of those things. Yeah. So going to a proficient doctor like Serrano or someone that knows those types of things is going to be a huge factor in your ability to be able to recover. But in reality, I think that the supplement industry has really attacked energy promotion way more than it should. And there was no energy drink to do that 520 for 24. There was no stimulant taken. There was no caffeine. There's nothing like that, because I don't want that energy. I need my own body to chill out and do the task at hand. I don't need nose torque. I don't need any of that bullshit. I just got to focus. And I find that a lot of that stuff really is crutches more than it is helps.
Yeah, speaking of the health professional, I'm going to slide in, the sponsor, MarekHealth.com, because of the blood work. And so that's going to be in the description as well. If you guys have been paying attention to the podcast over the past, since we started this season, this is a recurring theme, guys. People talking about, getting your blood work done, know where those levels are at, know where the hormone levels are at, know where the magnesium levels, vitamin D, know where that's at, know where all these things are at. And I understand a lot of you guys don't have medical professionals that you can walk into without being stereotyped, judged, or told it's not that big of a deal. That's what Marek Health is for. So they're a telehealth platform. The link is in the description. We have a Table Talk blood panel that you can take and give you a report showing you what's up, what's not, what you need to take and not need to take, or you can use their guided professional to be able to take you through, and they can give you prescriptions that you would need or supplementation recommendations.
And also stuff that we didn't have access to 25 years ago.
God, I wish I would have.
Dude.
Because even with Serrano, it was back then it was a battle. You know, I went because I wanted, I'm not dumb, you know, I wanted to know, you know, so it's, and things were good. I mean, this is kind of what we talked about through my younger years. I was doing a lot of fucked up shit and stuff was still good. And then it wasn't, you know, and the thing with that is there could have been 2 years, you know, in between that time where it wasn't, but I didn't know. So how much damage, fuck the damage, how much non-optimal recovery
and mileage
did I have in those 2 years that had I just been keeping up with it, I would have recovered better, probably did better in meets because those were 2 years of shitty fucking meets too, by the way. To be able to at least have a handle on it because it catches up. You can get away with it for some time. And the hormone optimization, it's huge because everybody's fucking hormones are plummeting right now. Performance
is health, but health isn't performance sometimes, especially when you're younger.
Yeah.
And you have to really get into that focus point and think, what's this at 40? If you're thinking that and you're getting your blood work done and you're getting these tests taken, it's an amazing scenario that they have available to them now that can put them in optimal so much easier than we could be put at optimal. We were just guessing, and sometimes guessing completely wrong. But what if you have that? And I mean, that doesn't guess, you know, like here it is, black and white. That's why I like looking at blood work stuff. It can't be really screwed with as much as training systems or, you know, just 3 sets of 10 work or this. Blood work is what it is.
No, it is. And there's more to it than what we fucking know, right? That's why there's professionals that actually do this. But you need to educate yourself enough, you know, to be able to have a pretty good idea of what they're talking about.
Absolutely.
And that's having a professional that can explain it to you helps too a lot, you know, because I mean, fuck, when I was coming up, being big, pink and purple was a good thing. No, it's not.
No.
You know, but at the time it was like, fuck, get to measure my head. It's so big right now. Who's got the biggest head? You know, who's got the biggest belly? You know, stupid shit like that. But
I don't think anybody could have beat Mike Rogerio.
No, hell no.
That dude was fucking purple with a 60-inch waist.
You're going to be doing some extra content for us here, which you guys will see on our YouTube. How can people get a hold of you?
Well, if they go to winningstrength.com, that's where we have all the manuals and equipment, and we do a lot of stuff on Train Heroic now. We have the conjugate training, and we have the tactical training, which is really exploding. So if you want to see the exact workouts I do with my fire departments that have lowered injury rates, gotten guys super strong from ages 20 to 65, they're sitting right there. The conjugate, we tried to make a little bit easier than what I do as far as equipment availability. So like if they go on Patreon, they can see exactly my workout, but it's with advanced shit. It'd be kind of like having your gym available. And we answer questions and try to help as much as we can to optimize that. But we also have the YouTube channel Winning Strength, where I got over 300 free videos, since I don't like to do free shit. I don't know how that works. I'm doing 2 fucking videos a week. But if most people's questions, if they wanted to dig through those videos and really listen and educate themselves, they would have their answer probably. So there's another thing. And then also on Instagram at Real Matt Wenning.
Okay. I appreciate you coming out. We did this kind of on a whim, so it's always good to have you out. I want to thank you guys for listening. I know you got other options, and we are out.